So this is a class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, and I will begin with the meditation for Sri Ramakrishna. Om Hridaya Kamala Madhye Rajitam Nirvikalpam Sada Sada Kila Bedati Kameka Swarupam Prakriti Vikriti Shunyam Nityamanandamurtim Vimala Paramahamsam Ramakrishnam Bhajamaha Nirupamamati Sukshmam Nishprapancham Nirhiham Gagana Sadrishamisham Sarvabhuta-divasam Trigunarahita Satchit Brahmarupam Varenyam Bimala Paramahamsam Ramakrishnam Bhajama Vitaritum Avatirnam Jnana Bhakti Prashanti Pranaya Galata Chittam Jiva Dukha Sahishnu Drita Sahaja Samadhim Chinmayam Komalangam Vimala Paramahamsam Ramakrishnam Bhajamaha. This knower of Brahman, ever established in his own nature, full of wisdom, self-possessed and self-lighted, eternal, the very image of that Brahman who is pure bliss, shining ceaselessly in the lotus of the heart, one alone and without parts, pure and still. This Ramakrishna, Paramatman Supreme, we adore. Subtle, fine and luminous, not even the shadow of the gross can ever reach him, for his purity is without parallel, untouched by Maya's webs of deceit, beyond the dark river of time and desire. Vast as the sky, this Supreme Lord, the very essence of Brahman as existence and light, this Ramakrishna, Paramatman Supreme, we adore. Saturated with divine consciousness, his home is in all. He hears every cry. He knows every pain. Under the weight of its compassion, his heart can deny the need of none. Born to raise the world with teachings of knowledge, love, and peace. Born to bring mankind fresh songs of joy. This certain refuge of all, this Ramakrishna, Paramahamsam, Paramatman Supreme, we adore. So one of the wonderful things about the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna is that we get many descriptions of him in various states of consciousness. And I remember when I first read it, I was so impressed because you could tell there was such joy in everything that was going on around him, and other people too could feel it, and they would all become sort of intoxicated with this divine joy. So one of my favorite parts is the festival at Panihati, because it gives a description of him dancing in ecstasy. And I want to begin with that, and then we'll read a little from one of the letters someone wrote to him, which is at the end. And I have another description of him dancing, which was given by Swami Sardananda, which I will end with, which is sort of unique. It's from the Ramakrishna as we saw him. I think what happened is that Chaitanyananda got many different sources, and he put them together so you get this wonderful picture. So this is the festival at Panihati. I'll just read a few pages from here. Monday, June 18th, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna had been invited to the great religious festival at Panihati near Calcutta. This festival of the flattened rice was inaugurated by Raghunath Das, a disciple of Sri Chaitanya. It is said that Raghunath used to run away from home and secretly practice his devotions and enjoy the bliss of spiritual ecstasy. One day Nityananda said to him, "Thief, you run away and enjoy the love of God all alone. You hide it from us. I shall punish you today. You must arrange a religious festival and entertain the devotees with flattened rice." Since then, the festival has been annually celebrated at Panihati by the Vaishnavas. Thousands of followers of Sri Chaitanya participate in it. Its chief feature is the singing of the names and glories of God and the dancing of the devotees in religious fervor. The center of the festivity is the temple of Radhakrishna, built on the bank of the Ganges. The master had been invited to the festival by Mani Sen, who was a custodian of the temple. Ram, M, Rakal, Bhavanath, and a few other disciples went with the master in a carriage. On his way to Panihati, Sri Ramakrishna was in a light mood and joked with the youngsters. But as soon as the carriage reached the place of the festival, the master, to the utter amazement of the devotees, shot out into the crowd. He joined the kirtan party of Nanadweep Goswami, Mani Sen's guru, and danced, totally forgetting the world. Every now and then he stood still in samadhi, carefully supported by Navadweep Goswami for fear he might fall to the ground. Thousands of devotees were gathered together for the festival. Wherever one looked, there was a forest of human heads. The crowd seemed to become infected by the master's divine fervor and swayed to and fro, chanting the name of God, until the very air seemed to reverberate with it. Drums, cymbals, and other instruments produced melodious sounds. The atmosphere became very intense with spiritual fervor. The devotees felt that Gauranga himself was being manifest in the person of Sri Ramakrishna. Flowers were showered from all sides on his feet and head. The shouting of the name of Hari was heard even at a distance, like the rumbling of the ocean. Sri Ramakrishna entered by turns into all the moods of ecstasy. In deep samadhi, he stood still, his face radiating a divine glow. In the state of partial consciousness, he danced, sometimes gently, and sometimes with the vigor of a lion. Again, regaining consciousness of the world, he sang, himself leading the chorus. "Behold, the two brothers have come who weep while chanting Hari's name. The brothers who dance in ecstasy and make the world dance in his name. Behold them weeping themselves and making the whole world weep as well. The brothers who, in return for blows, offer sinners Hari's love. Behold them, drunk with Hari's love, who make the world drunk as well. Behold, the two brothers have come, who were once Kanai and Balai of Braja. They who would steal the butter out of the pots of the gopi maidens. Behold, the two have come, who shatter all the rules of caste, embracing everyone as brother, even the outcast, shunned by men, who lose themselves in Hari's name, making the whole world mad, who are none other than Hari himself, and chant his hallowed name. Behold them, who saved from their sinful ways the ruffians Gadai and Madai, they who cannot distinguish between friend and enemy. Behold the two brothers, Gaur and Nityai, who again have come to save mankind. And again the Master sang, see how all Nadia is shaking under the waves of Gauranga's love. The crowd, with the Master in the center, surged toward the temple of Radhakrishna. Only a small number could enter. The rest stood outside the portal and jostled with one another to have a look at Sri Ramakrishna. In the mood of intoxication, he began to dance in the courtyard of the shrine. Every now and then, his body stood transfixed in deep samadhi. Hundreds of people around him shouted the name of God, and thousands outside caught the strain and raised the cry with full-throated voices. The echo traveled over the Ganges, striking a note in the hearts of the people in the boat on the holy river, and they too chanted the name of God. When the kirtan was over, Mani Sen took Sri Ramakrishna and Navadvip Goswami into a room and served them with refreshments. And afterward, Ram, M, and the other devotees were also served with the prasad. In the afternoon, the Master was sitting in Mani Sen's drawing room with the devotees. Navadvip was also near him. Mani offered the carriage hire to Sri Ramakrishna, pointing to Ram and the others. The Master said, why should they accept it from you? They earn money. He became engaged in conversation with Navadvip. Master, bhakti matured becomes bhava. Next is mahabhava, then prema, and last of all is the attainment of God. Gauranga experienced the states of mahabhava and prema. When prema is awakened, a devotee completely forgets the world. He forgets his body, which is so dear to a man. Gauranga experienced prema. He jumped into the ocean, thinking it to be the Jamuna. The ordinary jiva does not experience mahabhava or prema. He goes only as far as bhava. But Gauranga experienced all these three states. Isn't that so? Navadvip, yes, sir, that is true. The inmost state, the semi-conscious state, and the conscious state. Master, in the inmost state, he would remain in samadhi, unconscious of the outer world. In the semi-conscious state, he could only dance. In the conscious state, he chanted the name of God. Okay, now I'm going to go to a different section. This is a letter written to M by Aswin Kumar Datta. My beloved brother M, 3 days ago I received the fourth part of Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita, that's the Gospel, sent by you, and today I have finished reading it. You are blessed indeed. What heavenly nectar you have sprinkled over the country. A long time ago, you wanted me to set down my conversations with the Master. Now I shall try to write them for you. But I was not born under the lucky star of an M, that I might jot down the days and dates and hours of my visits with the Master and note them down correctly, the words uttered by his holy lips. In this letter, I'm giving you many of my experiences as I remember them. Very likely I shall confuse the events of one day with another, and I have forgotten many things. It was probably during the autumn of 1881 that I met Sri Ramakrishna the first time. I arrived at Dakshineswar in a country boat, and going up the steps of the landing ghat, somewhere and asked someone where the Paramahamsa was. "There is a Paramahamsa," was the reply. The man pointed out on the northern veranda which faced the garden. He was sitting reclining against a bolster. He wore a black-bordered cloth. At the sight of the bolster and the black-bordered cloth, I said to myself, "What kind of a Paramahamsa is this?" Going nearer, I found him half leaning against the bolster, with his hands clasped around his drawn-up knees. Then I thought, evidently he's not used to pillows as gentlemen are, so perhaps he is a Paramahamsa. At his right, very near the pillow, sat a gentleman whose name I came to know was Rajendra Lal Mitra, later the Assistant Secretary to the Government of Bengal. A little farther off sat some others. After a few moments, the master said to Rajendra Babu, "See whether Keshab is coming." Evidently, Keshab's son was expected that day. Someone walked away a few steps and coming back said, "No, he isn't." After a brief interval, hearing the sound outside, he said, "Please look once more." Again, someone went out and came back with the same reply. Then Sri Ramakrishna laughed and said, quoting a popular saying, "The leaves rustle outside and Radha says, 'Oh, here comes my sweetheart.'" Continuing, he said, "You see, Keshab always tantalizes me like this. This is his way." At dusk, Keshab came with his party. Keshab bowed low before the master, touching the ground with his forehead. The master returned his salutations in the same manner. Shortly afterward, Sri Ramakrishna said in a state of partial consciousness, "Look, he's brought the whole Calcutta crowd. I was supposed to deliver a lecture, but I won't do anything of the sort. Do it yourself if you like. Lecturing's none of my business." Still in an ecstatic mood, he said with a divine smile, "I shall eat, drink, and be merry. I shall play and sleep, but I can't give lectures." As Keshab Babu watched him, he became overpowered with divine emotion. Every now and then he said, "Ah, me, ah, me." I too watched the master and said to myself, "Can this be pretense? I'd never seen anything like it before, and you know how deep my faith is." Coming back from Samadhi, the master said to Keshab, "Keshab, once I went to your temple. In the course of your preaching, I heard you say, 'We shall dive into the river of devotion and go straight to the ocean of Satchidananda.' At once I looked up at the gallery where Keshab's wife and the other ladies were sitting, and I thought, what will become of these ladies? You see, Keshab, you are a householder. How can you reach the ocean of Satchidananda all at once? You're like a mongoose with a brick tied to its tail. When something frightens it, it runs up the wall and sits in a niche. But how can it stay there any length of time? The brick pulls it down and it falls to the floor. You may practice a little meditation, but the weight of wife and children will pull you down. You may dive into the river of devotion, but you must come up again. You will alternately dive and come up. How can you dive and disappear once and for all?" Keshab Babu said, "Can't a householder ever succeed? What about Maharishi Devendranath Tagore?" Twice or thrice the master repeated softly, "Devendranath Tagore, Devendra," and bowed to him several times. Then he said, "Let me tell you a story. A man used to celebrate the Durga Puja at his house with great pomp. Goats were sacrificed from sunrise to sunset. But after a few years, the sacrifice was not so imposing. Then someone said to him, 'How is it, sir, that the sacrifice at your place has become such a tame affair?' 'Don't you see,' he said, 'my teeth are gone now.' Devendra is now devoted to meditation and contemplation. It is only natural that he should be at his advanced age. but no doubt he's a great man. Do you see, as long as a man is under Maya's spell, he's like a green coconut. When you scoop out the soft kernel from the green coconut, you cannot help scraping away a little bit of the shell at the same time. But in the case of the ripe and dry coconut, the shell and kernel are separated from each other. When you shake the fruit, you can feel the kernel rattling inside. The man who is free from Maya is like the ripe and dry coconut. He feels the soul to be separated from the body. They are no longer connected with each other. It is the I that creates the trouble. Won't this wretched ego ever leave a person? You see a peepal tree growing from a rubbish of tumble-down house. You cut it down today, but tomorrow you find a new sprout shooting up. It is the same with the ego. You may wash 7 times a cup that onions has been kept in, but the wretched smell never leaves it. In the course of conversation, he said to Keshav, "Well, Keshav, I understand that your Calcutta Babus say that God does not exist. Is that true?" A Calcutta Babu wants to climb the stairs. He takes 1 step, but before taking the next, he cries out, "Oh, my side," and drops down unconscious. His relatives ready to hue and cry and send for a doctor. But before the doctor arrives, the man's very likely dead. And people of such stamina say there is no God. After an hour or so, the kirtan began. And what I saw then I shall never forget, either in this life or in the lives to come. Everyone danced, Keshav included. The master was in the center. All danced around him in a circle. During the dancing, Sri Ramakrishna suddenly stood motionless, transfixed in samadhi. A long time passed in this way. After hearing his words and seeing all this, I said to myself, yes, a Paramahamsa indeed. Another day, probably 1883, I visited the master with a few young men. Looking at them, he said, "Why have they come here?" Myself, "To see you." Master, "What is there to see in me? Why don't they go look at the buildings and the temples?" Myself, "Sir, they haven't come to see those things. They've come to see you." Master, "Then they must be flints. There is fire in them. You may keep a flint under water 1,000 years, but the moment you strike it, sparks come out. They must be of that type. But it will be useless to try to strike a fire out of me." At this last remark, we all laughed. I do not recall now what other things he said to us that day, but it seems to me he told us about the renunciation of woman and gold and the impossibility of getting rid of the ego. I visited him one other day, and when I bowed down to him and took a seat, he said, "Can you bring me some of that stuff, a little sour, a little sweet, that begins to fizz when you push down the cork?" Myself, "Lemonade?" Master, "Why don't you bring a bottle of it for me?" I think I brought him a bottle. So far as I remember, I was alone with him that day and asked him a few questions. Myself, "Do you observe caste?" Master, "How can I say yes? I ate curry at Keshav Sen's house. Let me tell you what happened to me. A man with a long beard brought some ice here, but I didn't feel like eating it. A little later, someone brought me a piece of ice from the same man, and I ate it with great relish. You see, caste restrictions fall away of themselves. As the coconut and palm trees grow up, the branches drop off of themselves. Caste convention drops off like that, but don't tear them off, as those fools do," meaning the Brahmas. Myself, "What do you think of Keshav Babu?" Master, "Oh, he is a saintly man." Myself, "And Trilokya Babu?" Master, "A fine man, he sings very well. Shivanath Babu. Myself, a very good man, but he argues. Myself, what is the difference between a Hindu and a Brahmo? Master, there's not much difference. In the serenade we have here, one flautist who plays a single note right along, while another plays various melodies. The Brahmos play one note, as it were, and they hold the formless aspect of God. But the Hindus bring out different melodies, that is to say, they enjoy God in his various aspects. The formless deity and God with form may be likened to water and ice. The water freezes into ice, the ice melts into water, and through the heat of jnana. Water takes the form of ice through the cooling influence of bhakti. The reality is one. People give it various names. Take the case of a lake with 4 landing ghats on its 4 banks. People who draw water at one ghat call it jal. Those who dwell it at a second ghat call it pani. And the third ghat they call it water, and at the fourth, aqua. But it is one and the same thing, water. I told the master that I had met Achalananda Tritirthavadu of Baisal. Master, is that Ramkumar of Gotrang? Myself, yes, sir. Master, how did you like him? Myself, very much. Master, well, whom do you like better, him or me? Myself, oh, can there be any comparison between you two? He's a scholar, an erudite person, but are you one? Sri Ramakrishna was a little puzzled at my reply and became silent. A moment later he said, he may be a scholar, but you are full of fun. There is great fun in your company. At this the master laughed and said, well said, right you are. He asked me, have you seen my Panchavati? Myself, yes, sir. He told me a little of what he had practiced there, his various religious austerities. He also told me about Nangta. Then I asked him, how can I realize God? Master, you see, he is constantly attracting us, like a magnet attracts iron. But the iron cannot come to the magnet if it is covered with dirt. When the dirt is washed away, the iron is instantly drawn to the magnet, weeps for God, and his tears wash away the dirt from the mind. As I was writing down his words, he remarked, look here, only repeating the word siddhi will not produce intoxication. You must actually get some hemp and rub it in water and drink the solution. Later he said, since you are going to lead a householder's life, create a intoxication in your mind with the thought of God. You will be doing your duties, but let that pleasant intoxication remain with you. You cannot, of course, like Sukdev, be inebriated with the thought of God, so inebriated with the thought of God that you will lie naked and unconscious as long as you live in the world. Give God the power of attorney. Make over all your responsibilities to him. Let him do as he likes. Live in the world like a maidservant in a rich man's house. She bathes her master's children, washes them, feeds them, and takes affectionate care of them in many ways, as if they were her own children. But in her heart, she knows very well they don't belong to her. No sooner is she dismissed than it's all over, and she has no relationship with children. Before breaking open the jackfruit, you should rub your hands with oil in order to protect them from the sticky juice. Likewise, protect yourself with the oil of devotion. Then the world will not cling to you, and you will not be affected by it. All this time, Sri Ramakrishna was seated on the floor. Now he got up and stretched himself on his cot. He said, "Fan me a little." I began to fan him, and he was silent. After a while, he said, "Oh, it's so hot. Why don't you dip the fan in water?" "Ah," I said, "you have your fancies too." The master smiled and drawled out, "Why not?" "Very well," I said. "Have your full measure of them." I cannot express in words how immensely I enjoyed the company that day. The last time I visited him, you have mentioned it in the third part of your book, I had with me the headmaster of our school, who had then graduated. You met him the other day. As soon as Sri Ramakrishna saw him, he asked me, "Where did you pick him up? He's a fine fellow." Then he continued, "You are a lawyer. You're very clever. Can you give me a little of your cleverness? The other day your father came here and stayed 3 days. Myself, how did you find him?" Master, a nice man, but now and then he talks nonsense. Master, please help him get over it when you see him next. At this, Sri Ramakrishna smiled a little. Myself, please give us a few instructions. Master, do you know Hriday? Myself, your nephew, I know him only by name. Master, Hriday used to say to me, "Uncle, please give me your stock of instructions all at once. Why should you repeat the same thing over and over again?" I would reply, "You fool, what is that to you? These are my words, and if I like, I shall repeat them 100,000 times. You keep quiet." Master, myself smiling, "Exactly so." A little later, he sat on the bed and he repeated Om several times and began to sing a song whose first line is, "Dive deep, O mind, dive deep in the ocean of God's beauty." Hardly had he sung 1 or 2 lines when he himself dived deep and was lost in samadhi. When the samadhi was over, he began to pace the room with both hands. He pulled up the cloth he was wearing till it reached his waist. One end of it was trailing on the floor and the other was hanging loose. Nudging my companion, I whispered, "See how nicely he wears his cloth." A moment later, he threw the cloth away with the words, "Ugh! These are a nuisance. Off with them." He began to pace up and down the room naked. From the northern end of the room, he brought an umbrella and a stick and asked us, "Are these yours?" Scarcely had I replied when he said, "I knew it. I can judge a man by his stick and umbrella. They must belong to the man who was here some time ago and swallowed a lot of my words without understanding them." A few minutes later, he sat down, still naked, on the northern end of his cot facing the west and asked me, "Well, do you consider me ungentlemanly?" Myself, "Of course not. You're a perfect gentleman. But why do you ask me that?" Master, "You see, Shivanath and others don't think I'm a gentleman. When they come, I have to wrap the cloth around me. Do you know Girish Ghosh?" Myself, "Which Girish Ghosh? The one in the theater?" Master, "Yes." Myself, "I've never seen him, but I know him by reputation." Master, "A good man." Myself, "They say he drinks." Master, let him. How long will that continue? Do you know Narendra? Myself, "No, sir." I wish very much that you could meet him. He has passed the BA examination and is unmarried. Myself, "Very well, I shall meet him." Master, "Today there will be a kirtan at Ram Datta's house. You may meet him there. Please go there this evening." Myself, "All right." Master, "Yes, do. Don't forget." Master, "It is your command. Shall I not obey it? Surely I will go." He showed us the pictures in his room and asked me whether a picture of Buddha could be had. Myself, "Very likely." "Please get one for me." Master, myself, "Very well, I will bring one when I come again." But alas, I never returned to Dakshineswar. That evening I went to Ram Babu's house and met Narendra, In one of the rooms, the master sat reclining against a pillow. Narendra sat to his right, and I sat in front. He asked Narendra to talk to me, but Narendra said, "I have a bad headache today and I don't feel like talking." I replied, "Then let's put it off till another day." And that day did come to pass in May or June of 1897 at Almora. The will of the master had to be fulfilled, and it was fulfilled after 12 years. How happy I spent those few days with Swami Vivekananda at Almora. Sometimes at his house, sometimes at mine, one day on top of a hill with no one accompanying us. I never met him after that. It was as if to fulfill the master's wish that we saw each other at Almora. I saw the master not more than 4 or 5 times, but in that short time, we became so intimate that I felt as if we'd been classmates. How much liberty I took while speaking with him. No sooner had I left his presence than flashed on me, "Good gracious, think where I've been." What I saw and received in those few days has sweetened my whole life. That Elysian smile of his, laden with nectar, I've locked up in the secret closet of my memory. That is the unending treasure of a hapless person like myself. A thrill of joy passes through my heart when I think of how a grain of the bliss shed from that laughter has been sweetening the lives of millions, even in distant America. If that be my case, you may very well understand how lucky you are. So I would like to just read this other section about him dancing. And that's really going to be it for this. This is from Ramakrishna as we saw him, Swami Saradananda. And it took place on Monday, November 26th, so it was near Thanksgiving, in 1883. We arrived at Mani Malik's house at 4 o'clock. When we inquired about the master, a man showed us the parlor upstairs. The room was beautifully decorated with flowers and leaves for the festival, and some devotees were there talking with one another. They told us that the noon service music was over, and that the master had gone to the inner apartment at the request of the women devotees. In the evening, there would be another service and kirtan. When we heard that it would be some time before the evening service would begin, we went out for a while. In the evening, we returned to the festival, and loud sound of the mridanga. We hurried into the house and up to the parlor, knowing that the kirtan had begun. And what we saw there defies description. Inside the hall was a thick crowd that spilled outside. So many people were standing in every doorway and on the western roof that it was almost impossible to push through the crowd into the room. The devotees were craning their necks and watching intently what was happening inside the hall. Full of devotion, they were completely unaware of their surroundings. When we saw that it would be impossible to enter the room through the front door, we went around the house and crossed the western roof and approached the northern door of the hall. The crowd there was somewhat thinner, so we were able to thrust our heads into the room. We saw a wonderful scene. High waves of heavenly bliss seemed to be flowing in the room. Everyone there was laughing, crying, and dancing. They had become completely lost in the kirtan. Some people were overwhelmed with emotion and acted like lunatics. The master was dancing in the center of that God-intoxicated group, rapidly moving forward and backward with rhythmic steps. In whatever direction he moved, the crowd made room for him, as if enchanted. An extraordinary combination of tenderness, sweetness, and leonine strength was visible in every movement of the Master's limbs. His face shone with a divine smile. What a superb dance! There was no artificiality or affectation in it, no jumping or unnatural gestures or acrobatics, nor was there any absence of control. Rather, one saw the Master dancing in a rhythm of natural gestures and movements that sprang from his overwhelming bliss, sweetness, and zeal. His phenomenal dance was like that of a big fish that swims freely and joyfully throughout a vast, clear lake, sometimes slowly and sometimes quickly. Absorbed in the ocean of blissful Brahman, the Master used his body to express his inner feelings. At times he lost consciousness of his surroundings as he danced, and sometimes his cloth fell away from his body. When that happened, someone would fasten it tightly around his waist. And if he saw anyone becoming overwhelmed with spiritual emotion and losing consciousness, he would touch that man's chest and bring him back to a normal state. A current of divine bliss emanated from the Master and spread in all directions, allowing the devotees to see God face to face. Those of lukewarm temperament found their fervor intensified. Those with idle minds began enthusiastically to progress in the realm of spirituality, and those who were attached to the world became for a while free from their attachment. Among those who experienced ecstasy and lost outer consciousness from time to time were Vijay Krishna Goswami, the leader of the Brahmo Samaj, and even some of the Brahmo devotees. Chiranjeev Sharma, accompanied by a one-stringed instrument, sang in his sweet voice, "Dance, O children of the blissful mother, round and round." He was beside himself. The kirtan continued for more than 2 hours in this manner, closing with this song. Who has brought Sweet Hari's name to the world? As Nitai, or was it brought by Gaur or Advaita of Shantipur? Finally, everyone praised and bowed down to all religious denominations and spiritual teachers, and the wonderful kirtan came to an end. So I will leave you with that picture in your minds. The wonderful thing about this, the gospel, is Sri Ramakrishna said he used to, as he was teaching people, he would suddenly just get a picture in his mind of what to say. And then he would teach in parables that were very common that people could understand, but he would see it. You know, when he began to speak, he would see the right thing to say. So I'm going to chant. Om Jo Shantir Antariksham Shanti Prithivi Shantir Apashanti Oshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Vishwe Deva Shantir Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Same Shantireti Om Shanti Shanti, Shanti. Peace is in the heaven. Peace is in the sky and on the earth and in the waters. The herbs, the plants, and the trees are all full of peace. The gods are peaceful. Everything in the universe is pervaded by peace. May this eternal universal peace enter our soul and being. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. Now, what will happen when I don't know how to turn it off. Thank you.
Mataji,
Yes.
what does Master mean when he says, "Oh, I don't give lectures, I just eat and sleep and make merry"?
Yeah. What do you mean? What does he mean? He said it. He doesn't think, and plan what he's going to say. That's sort of what I was trying to tell you about the way that he actually taught. That he would just see the thing and, present it to people. He didn't, in the Brahma Samaj, they gave whole lectures, on God and formless God and God with form. And although he would touch all those topics, he did it in a different way. He did it mostly through parables, like the ice and, melting. Or he said one time he saw, when he was talking to the ladies, that pestle, and how they had to keep their hands away from it or they'd get hurt, but at the same time they were nursing their child and taking care of their duties. Yeah, so that's why it's so... Jesus also did that. I mean, they talk in parables that are very understandable to us also, because he could immediately see what was applicable to his audience. Yeah. But it wasn't a bland lecture like we give, enforced.
When he says to Ashwin Datta that you have to create that pleasant intoxication.
Yeah, and live with that all the time. In your meditation, hopefully, through the grace of God. And I think also through chanting the name of God does that, because then it just starts sort of going on all the time. I mean, some people say, even when you wake up, it should be going. When you fall asleep, it should also continue going. And that makes you kind of intoxicated if you do that.
Chanting and repetition valuable?
Yes, because you're training your mind to try to be one-pointed. So it's helpful. And I mean, your religious practices are good, but when they become a habit, then they're better. But you can pray for that. Pray for devotion and, we're given the practices so that we can purify our minds. Yeah. All right. For me. Yeah. Yeah, she didn't have time for anything else. I mean, when you think of how much japa she did, I mean, she was doing it all the time. Obviously, it was going on continuously, night and day. And that's what, ideally, it should be, because then it would just be a flow, and it would be just a very blissful state, I'm sure.
Well, considering the number against the hours of the day, it seems like she would just be like a manasa japa, just doing it over and over, very quickly.
Yeah, I think it just kind of merges into one thing, when you get going for a long period of time. There are practices where you increase it a certain number and then go back, that kind of thing. But
why would anybody want to come down with the moon? Like, what is it up there? Why is that second half of the push?
Well, because most people can't stay there, and you'll have a reaction, if you push yourself too hard.
Was she chanting a Ramakrishna mantra?
I don't know. You'll have to ask her. But, I mean, he initiated her, so. I know some of them. I know Swamiji got a Rama mantra, I know that. So in some of the books they do say that Ramakrishna wrote a mantra on the tongue, of different people, so what they're. But she had a picture of Ramakrishna. So
Is that her only picture?
that I also don't know.
Picture Kali? The Darshan Mahavidya's Kali.
Yeah, and we just finished Durga Puja too, so. Thank you for coming.
Don't go yet, Mataji.
Oh, yes.
Doesn't matter either.
That's enough. Just think of that beautiful face and that dance. I mean, that's fantastic, that description of him dancing. That's something you can meditate on. There's a thing, I think, in the Kashi Khanda where it says just the sidelong glance of the goddess, will liberate you. I always have loved that, just the idea that just a glance from the eye, is enough to liberate a person, if they're ready. All right, thank you.